Somewhere near here lives the killer they call the Yorkshire Ripper. His 5-year career of killing began in the red light district of Chapeltown. On October the 30th, 1975, he killed a 28-year-old prostitute, and this killing was followed less than a month later by another at Preston, Lancashire. Even then, detectives suspected one man. Now, 5 years later, the death toll has reached 13, each death bringing grief and tragedy to the victim's family.
Hello and welcome to Criminal History, and today we are going to be talking about Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. Jack the Ripper was the most infamous serial killer of all time. Thankfully, Jack's reign of terror ended with only 5 known victims. However, nearly 100 years later, England would produce the next heir of evil in Peter Sutcliffe. Before he was identified, he inherited the name Ripper to be known as the Yorkshire Ripper, a hammer-wielding maniac. This time, the Ripper would be much more deadly, with at least 13 people dying by his hands. For 5 years, he was as elusive as Jack, and he terrified the streets of Yorkshire. Peter Sutcliffe was born the eldest of 6 children. Throughout his childhood, he was known to be shy, sickly, weak, and a mummy's boy. His father was a deeply disrespectful man who cheated on and beat his wife and bragged about it to his children. Peter began to view women through the violent, misogynistic lens of his father. To make matters worse, when he went to school, he was bullied. So, he left school at the earliest opportunity with no qualifications. His father was also violent to him. According to Wikipedia, his dad once smashed a beer glass over his head on Christmas Day. He would also whip the children with a belt for the littlest reason. He worked a number of menial jobs before settling down as a gravedigger and mortuary worker. Strangely, he really enjoyed this position and he became fascinated by death and dead bodies. However, he did not have any respect for the dead. He would steal things from the bodies whenever he could. This also meant he became extremely desensitized to death, seeing life and death in black and white without the spiritual mystique. However, he later claimed that whilst working as a gravedigger, he heard God speaking to him. He claimed God was commanding him to clean the streets of promiscuous women. In 1969, his father John set up his wife in a cheating sting operation. He rang up his wife pretending to be someone else and arranged for them both to hook up at a hotel. However, John would bring the whole family around to embarrass and humiliate her for cheating. This scenario meant that Peter's image of his mother was shattered and his respect for women in general was obliterated. Around 1974, he also became involved in voyeurism by spying on sex workers when he was not at work. On July 5th, he attacked his first non-fatal victim. He used a hammer and knife, but the victim survived serious injuries that required brain surgery. This also left her with deep trauma and mental health problems thereafter. He then attacked Olive Smelk in August 1975, but she managed to escape and give vital details that were later dismissed. She gave a description and said he spoke with a Yorkshire accent. That same year, he even attacked a child, 14-year-old Tracy Brown. He attacked her on a country lane, striking her 5 times before being spooked by a car driving by. She also had to have emergency brain surgery. His gruesome reign of killings began in October 1975 when the body of 28-year-old Wilma McCann was found in Leeds, within sight of her home. She had been beaten on the head with a hammer and stabbed repeatedly with a Phillips screwdriver.
Well, we now know that just turned 1 a.m. on the morning of the 30th, yesterday morning, the dead woman, Wilma McCann, was alive and well and standing on this spot. She came out of the room at the Top Club, which is over the road there, and she was standing here, and just turned 1 a.m. A man in a private car was forced to stop when she jumped into the road in front of his car. She said to him, "Can you give me a lift to Stothall Road," which is where she was found dead actually.
He then attacked and killed a woman named Emily Jackson in January 1976 with the same method.
Is there any link with previous murders in Leeds?
Well, there are distinct similarities between this murder and the murder of Wilma McCann, which happened 29th of October. And we are looking into these possibilities.
Ever since Mrs. Jackson's body was discovered here, and ever since her killing was linked with that of Wilma McCann last October, the prostitutes of Leeds have walked in fear.
It was during this slaying that he would leave a clue for the police. He had stamped on the body and left an imprint of a Wellington boot on her leg. The police were able to identify that the boot worn was a Dunlop Warwick model in size 7. He would then attack a 20-year-old woman named Marcella Claxton, who was walking home from a party in Leeds. He offered her a lift, but when she left the car to pee, he smashed her with a hammer. The young lady, who was also 4 months pregnant, would suffer a miscarriage after the attack. She managed to crawl away to a phone box to survive. However, yet again, her description of the attacker was dismissed. It was another year until he committed his next murder, and by that time, the police had realised they were dealing with a serial killer.
Most of the senior men on the Ripper inquiry are from outside Yorkshire, but they're led by Assistant Chief Constable Jim Hobson, a Leeds detective who has worked on 3 Ripper murders.
The press dubbed Peter the Yorkshire Ripper. In February 1977, Irene Richardson was found dead in Leeds. The same method of execution was used, and another clue was left by the killer. Large tyre tracks were found at the scene of the crime, letting police know they were looking for a van or large car. They traced vehicles that had been fitted with the specific tyres from the murder scene. However, there were over 100,000 matches in Yorkshire alone. It was also becoming clear that the Ripper was mainly targeting street prostitutes. However, this meant that earlier survivors who were not prostitutes were not linked to the killer, and the photo fits they provided were disregarded. In April of that year, he killed again in Bradford. This time he killed the woman inside her own flat. This change in location was speculated to be an attempt to disguise his latest killing. However, he left another boot print at the scene, and he killed her the same way as the others. Was Patricia Atkinson, who was another call girl who went by the name Tina. She would scout local pubs looking for clients to take back to her flat. The police began to operate under the theory that the killer was killing because he had a hatred of prostitutes.
Have you altered your opinion at all in this past week of the sort of man you're looking for?
No, we're quite certain that this man hates prostitution.
In June 1977, he attacked a 16-year-old girl named Jane MacDonald who was walking home after a night out. As she had missed the last bus, she was forced to walk home. Unfortunately, Peter stalked her like a predator, attacked her and left her body in a playground, attacking her as usual, but this time adding a broken glass bottle as a weapon. The following month, another survivor emerged in the form of a lady named Maureen Long. Maureen was also attacked in Bradford after a night out. She was on the way to get a taxi, but a man in a white car offered her a lift home, which she accepted. Unbeknownst to her, she was placing herself in the jaws of evil as the Yorkshire Ripper was behind the wheel. After attacking her with a hammer, he dragged her out of the car to finish the job. However, a dog started howling, which made the killer flee the scene. Maureen was found the next morning, still alive. The survivor was able to provide the first accepted composite sketch and description of the Yorkshire Ripper. He was white in his mid-30s with a large build. A night watchman had also witnessed the car that was used. It was a white Ford Cortina Mark II. This car was often used by taxi drivers, which provided another clue. Using this information, the police found their first suspect, Terry Hawkshaw. However, he was soon ruled out as a suspect. As it turned out, the description of the car was wrong. Peter Sutcliffe was actually driving a Ford Corsair. In October 1977, he killed again. This time, he would pick up a working girl named Jean Jordan whilst in Manchester. He drove to a vacant lot and killed her with a hammer before dumping her body. However, he made another mistake. He left a £5 note he had given Jean as payment, which he believed may be traceable back to him. He even went back to find the note a week later, but couldn't find her purse. Bizarrely, the body was later found by Bruce Jones, who would later become a household name as Les Battersby on Coronation Street. The £5 note was, as Peter thought, able to be traced back to its origin. It came from the Midland Bank in Shipley. This note was given out as payroll, with 34 possible businesses to look into. This meant around 5,000 workers were interviewed, including Peter Sutcliffe, who was questioned twice. However, he provided a solid but fake alibi. In December of the same year, he again left a surviving witness in Marlin Moor. Again, a dog saved the life of one of his victims as it began barking and the Ripper fled again. Another sketch was provided to the police. The police were beginning to tighten the net around the killer, but this is when the investigation would be severely derailed in the wrong direction. In 1978, he killed 2 women at the start of the year named Yvonne Pearson and Helen Ritker. He even took the bizarre step of stuffing horsehair into Yvonne's mouth after killing her. In March of that year, the police opened a letter which was said to be from the killer, but this turned out to be a hoax. The letter read, "Dear Sir, I am sorry I cannot give you my name for obvious reasons. I am the Ripper. I've been dubbed a maniac by the press, but not by you. You call me clever, and I am. You and your mates haven't a clue. That photo in the paper gave me fits, and that bit about killing myself, no chance. I've got things to do. My purpose to rid the streets of them sluts. My one regret is that young lassie MacDonald did not know, cause changed his routine that night. Up to number 8, now you say 7, but remember Preston 75, Get about you now. You were right, I travel a bit. You'd probably look for me in Sunderland. Don't bother, I am not daft. Just posted a letter there on one of my trips. Not a bad place compared with Chapeltown and Manningham and other places. Warn Hawes to keep off the streets cause I feel it coming on again. Sorry about young lassie. Yours respectfully, the Ripper. The police believed this and the preceding letters to be genuine, especially as his next victim was older, as he suggested in the letter. Her name was Vera Millward, a 41-year-old from Manchester, who was killed in May of that year. She was on the way to the shops to buy cigarettes. This was all the chance it took for the Ripper to strike. Sutcliffe again waited a year for his next victim when he struck in April 1979. He killed a 19-year-old named Josephine Whittaker. The hoaxer then again contacted the police, this time with a tape recording. This further threw the police off the real Ripper as he now began looking for a killer with a Geordie accent and not a Yorkshire native.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. Good Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they? I'm not quite sure when I'll strike again. But it will be definitely sometime this year. I'm not sure where. Maybe Manchester. I like it there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? At the rate I'm going, I should be in the River Records. I think it's 11 up now, isn't it? Well, it's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
Voice analysts were brought in and they were able to track the dialect down even further. It was a Wearside accent near Sunderland and more specifically Castletown. The full investigation turned in this direction looking for this man. However, the whole thing was a cruel joke which may have led to more deaths as police were investigating the wrong person. For example, hotlines were opened for tip-offs, the press published the letters and audio, and billboards and adverts were placed all around Yorkshire. Even when survivors told officers he was not a Geordie, they still went ahead trying to find one. Whilst the investigation was preoccupied looking for this hoax caller, the Ripper attacked again. First he killed 20-year-old Barbara Leach in September of 1979.
The Ripper in the tape-recorded message had warned that he would strike again, possibly in September or October. Were you prepared for this?
Well, of course, we can't cater for the killing of the odd female at any time.
What's worrying the police is that despite the Ripper's last warning, he was still able to strike again. The truth is, they couldn't do much to stop him, for even with his voice on tape, his handwriting, and the evidence of 12 murders, they still don't know who he is.
In 1980, he killed Margaret Walls, this time by strangulation. Like some of the others, these two were not prostitutes, but the police refused to broaden the victim demographic. He then killed a doctor, Rupaja Bandara, and an art student named Maureen Lee in Chapeltown, who both survived. Lee even suffered a puncture to the back of her skull and a severed spinal cord. a 16-year-old, was then saved by her boyfriend when she was attacked. Teresa Syke was walking to the shops when he struck, but her boyfriend heard her screams and chased off the attacker.
I couldn't run. Couldn't do half the things that you always think, yeah, you can do, and I couldn't do it. So I grabbed hold of the gate, and that is when he hit me. I started screaming. I can remember screaming, and then I can remember the steering footsteps running, and then the next door neighbour came out and then took me in the house.
He then killed his final victim, Jackie Hill, a student who was walking to her halls of residence in Leeds. Sadly, she was only around 100 feet from safety. She was stabbed in the chest and eye by the Ripper. It was in 1981 when the killer was finally caught. He went scouting for a victim in Sheffield. However, when he picked up his intended next victim, Olivia Reevers, he was pulled over by police. Immediately, he was arrested for having false number plates on his car. However, he fooled the police into hiding the weapons he had on him on the way to the station. He pretended he needed to pee, and when they stopped by the side of the road to allow him to do his business, he threw away the weapons. They also later found a knife of his stashed in the cistern of the police toilets. When they got back to the station, all the evidence piled up against him. He had the right shoe size for one, and he looked remarkably like the composite sketches. The police went back to where they allowed him to pee, and they found the murder weapons. He quickly confessed to the murder to interviewing detectives. The killer was found to be Peter Sutcliffe, a married lorry driver. This was how he was able to move around without causing suspicion, and how he knew the best areas to attack people and hide their bodies. When they caught him, the public was outraged at the police incompetence. Sutcliffe, as it turned out, had been questioned on 9 separate occasions. He was one of the workers who had been paid the £5 note. He had been spotted numerous times in the red light district, and he fit the description perfectly. One of Peter's acquaintances, Trevor Birdsall, even told police that he suspected he was the killer. All this damning evidence was ignored because he did not have a Geordie accent.
Well, I'm glad Mr. Gregory's been critical of the press, because I needn't be shy about saying that this was perhaps the biggest balls up in police history. It was totally and utterly mishandled from A to Z. And if we ever get to the bottom of it and the truth of it, it will probably be in a newspaper. It will be up to journalists to find out what exactly happened. Here we had a man who had been done in 1969 for possession of a hammer, who had been cited over 50 times in the red light districts, who had been questioned up to 9 times by the police. He said he lost count. Whose the £5 note paid to a prostitute was traced back to Clark Transport, where he worked. Every time, again, Sutcliffe, 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 and he wasn't even in the top 40 suspects. Now, I believe there's something wrong there. I want to know the answer to those questions.
It was also found that in 1969 he was caught hitting a prostitute over the head with a rock and a sock. However, the police let him go with a warning, as she did not want to press charges. They eventually caught the hoaxer, who became known as Wearside Jack in 2005. The hoaxer was called John Humble, and he was given an 8-year prison sentence for perverting the course of justice. There was further controversy when Peter Sutcliffe was arrested, as he pleaded not guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility. This meant if he was found to be insane, he would be sentenced to a mental institution instead of prison. He claimed he was acting on behalf of God, who had been demanding him to kill. But the judge did not buy the schizophrenia diagnosis, and he was found guilty and sentenced to life behind bars.
Police cordoned off part of the town centre as nearly 2,000 people jostled for a vantage point. A 35-year-old lorry driver arrived in a police van. The crowd surged forward, shouting abuse and threats.
In 1984, he was sent to Broadmoor, an infamous high-security psychiatric hospital, as he was found to be a paranoid schizophrenic. Brazenly, he even tried to appeal his sentence in 2010, but it was firmly rejected. He was to serve his full life behind bars. In 2016, he was returned to Her Majesty's Prison Frankly in Durham. He died in 2022 of diabetes and coronavirus-related issues. At least he suffered a small glimpse of what he put others through.